award-winning journalist, Chandra Thomas Whitfield. Welcome to the show, Chandra.
What an honor to be here. I'm excited.
I'm excited to have you. All right. As if 2020 hasn't been bad enough, Black women, we're still getting the shaft and making less than white men for the same work. Do tell.
Welcome to In the Gap.
My new podcast, In the Gap, and of course it is available on all the major platforms. We talk about the gender pay gap, which is the fact that women, regardless of race, are paid less. But Black women, that number is 62 cents for every dollar paid to white men. And just to put that into perspective, that number is 87 cents for like a Black man and 79 cents for a white woman. So when you put that all together, the research shows that Black women lose $946,000 over the course of a 35 to 40 year career. And that's a huge number. So that's what I talk about in this podcast.
Oh my God, that hurt. That number hurt. So where does this pay gap really show up? Is it only in lower paying positions or in any position?
Actually, it shows up, and what I try to do with this podcast is tell the stories of Black women across the board. So we have blue collar workers as well as professionals. And so what's interesting, though, is that the pay gap is actually higher the more educated you are as a Black woman. And like you said, $946,000. I know I could do a lot with that. And so this is an issue that we need to be talking about.
So what is the reason for this gap?
Well, it was very important for this podcast to talk about the history. So my second episode of In the Gap is called Roots. And we talk about the fact that this dates back to slavery, the fact that Black women have always worked. There is no story about, we stayed at home and took care of kids. No, Black women have always worked and has always had the highest representation in the American labor force. And you look back at slavery, Black women not only had to work, but they also had to produce more laborers. So our contributions to the American workforce cannot be measured in numbers or dollars.
What can we do to make sure that we're getting the green too? And for some, is it a matter of just learning how to better negotiate salaries?
Well, I think it's very important, and this was very important in my podcast. I do have an episode called Negotiate, 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 because many of the women that I interviewed said that honestly, they didn't negotiate or they did not know how to negotiate. So we talk and we give tips, but it's very important to note that this podcast is research-based. It's not just anecdotal. And what you will find in the research is that Black candidates, when they ask for more money, depending on the actual person hiring, it is often perceived negatively for you to advocate for yourself. And that goes back to stereotypes that person may have about Black candidates not being as valuable or worthy in the workplace.
And so that would make people hesitate. And that's why you may not go in and ask for a raise or ask for more money. What can you do if you are a little bit scared to go ahead and ask, especially during a pandemic when so many people are already out of work? What are folks to do?
That's a great point. I think that you do need to negotiate because it is a form of advocating for yourself. But what we try to get across in this podcast is that this is a systemic issue. Tongue twister, a systemic issue that has to be addressed systemically. So we talk about organizing and labor unions and the fact that there's an issue called pay transparency, where companies are voluntarily sharing all of the salaries to try to put things out in the open. And so what we have to do is look at this pay gap, acknowledge that it exists, and actually stand up when we see women getting paid less.
Let's talk about, you were saying usually the last hired, first fired.
Exactly.
What are women doing because of what they're facing on the job? Are they just stomping out and say, you know what, I can do it on my own. I'm going to create my own wealth?
Well, I think that, unfortunately, many of us don't feel that empowered because we have been, we feel powerless. So I think that most people are staying in the workplace and kind of enduring it. And you will hear that in the podcast. Many women just getting tired of fighting and just kind of weary. But what you also will find is that a lot of Black women are saying, enough is enough. I'm going to start my own business and I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And the statistics show that Black women are the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs. So I am one of them. I actually decided to leave a full-time newsroom position to be an entrepreneur. So I think that there's lots of resources out there. And the good thing is, with the pandemic going on and this renewed interest in Black Lives Matter, there is renewed interest in Black businesses. And in fact, Google reported a 300% increase in queries about Black businesses. So this is our time to shine. So I tell my sisters, go for it. This is the time.
It's the time. It's been the time, girl. All right. So when we come back, more with Chandra. And also we're going to talk about the rise of Black female judges in one particular state and why that's such a huge deal. So can you guys guess which state that is? We'll have the answer when we come back. They won't guess. More when we come back.